What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode right here on Pick Swap Media. My name is Sean Barnard, as always, here with my guy James Birrane, back after a little bit of a break. Have been a little all over the place so far to start this offseason, but keeping it consistent with a ton of draft coverage. So make sure to check out all those prospect breakdowns that are coming out. But today we are going to talk some Sixers. So James, how we doing, my friend?
Doing well. Watching a lot of the Stanley Cup Finals, that's for sure.
Yeah, go Oilers, I guess. Even though Florida looks like they got them on the ropes as well, but nothing like some good hockey talk to get us going. But I do want to shift to the NBA world here, where the vibes are even darker or even less fun, I would say. So I want to start things off. My first question for you is: the Boston Celtics are now one win away from officially becoming NBA champions, holding a dominant 3-0 lead over the Dallas Mavericks. As a Sixers fan, as a person who has gone through the process, how does that make you feel, James?
Yeah, just about as bad as you could imagine.
Yeah.
It's not a fun situation. They're very it would be one thing if they've just stumbled and found their way there, and you could kind of back it up by trying to discredit them in some sort of way. The problem is they're really, really well built. They have great players all over. They've done a fantastic job, top to bottom, of building that team,
Yep.
surrounding their star players with complementary players and really high level role players. So it's frustrating to see other people happy.
Yeah, it certainly is. And this is no fluke. Like you said, the Celtics are absolutely the best team in the NBA and have been all season. And I think a lot of us were still skeptical because of the past demons, the shortcomings in the last 2 minutes. And honestly, my perspective on this series as a whole was that if the game went down to the wire, if it was a 2 minutes to decide it with a tie ball game, I think the Mavericks find a way to win that game almost 10 times out of 10. But you know what? They haven't even had that opportunity because that's how good these Celtics have been. And by the way, they're doing all this while Jason Tatum is not even particularly playing well, which it is a testament to how good that team is, how deep that roster is, and how much these Sixers have fallen short in a lot of these categories. And it's particularly intimidating when you think to the future right here. Jaylen Brown, 27 years old. Jason Tatum, I believe, 26 years old. That's sure there's going to be decisions that need to be made around the edges, but they did things right. They got their core. They nailed it. They stuck with it. They stuck through these concerns of can these guys play together? And we see what these Sixers have done to this point. In contrast, the Sixers have one current player on their roster, that being Joel Embiid. Of course, there are the player options, the team options, the non-guaranteed, and of course, like we know, a guy like Tyrese Maxey will eventually be re-signed. But at this point in time, that it is just Joel Embiid on roster, and that's quite the difference from the Celtics, who have such a polished roster. So I won't lie and say this one isn't hitting me in the heart a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's pretty brutal. I won't lie. And to be completely honest, I've turned on a lot of these games, watched the first half, and then turned it off because I can't take it. I don't want to see any of it happen. I just want to avoid it at all costs. So my focus has been mostly like draft and post draft into the off season and focusing on the way the Sixers are going to build the roster. But it's one of those things, man, where like you said, Tatum is he's getting discredited a lot. He has not played great basketball, but he's not really getting in the way of the team, which I think is,
Sure.
I guess you can put that as a testament to him. I do think it's something to be noted that like he is a willing passer and he is like getting other guys involved. He's not like stopping the flow of their team to try to get his shot, albeit he has not shot well. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting way to play out this season and have to deal with the ramifications of the Celtics winning a championship and the Celtics fans acting like this has been like a long time coming, as if this is like I think that might be the biggest thing for me. The thing that bothers me the most is like Boston fans act like they've been tortured by the Celtics and like by these teams. It's like you've seen more success in the last 6 years than most
Yeah.
teams will see in their life. And anyone that's our age that's a Boston fan has, for a lifetime they've been covered by all of their teams. So congrats to them, I guess. But
Yes.
not over yet. Not over yet. Not over yet.
That's yeah, I guess they got to still finish the job, win one more game. I'm not too worried about that actually happening, and that has a lot to do with how poorly the Mavericks have looked and how out of their league they've looked in certain moments. Luka Doncic, disgusting stuff to foul out of that game, and just kind of the way that he let his game get completely rattled, and a game that was there for the taking. I think if that he does not foul out, the Mavericks likely win that game, and that's blowing things. That's them having the opportunity and losing it there. But I did kind of want to dig in a little bit on like the bigger picture conversation here, and while I hear you on that, like maybe pumping the chest a little bit about, being a long time coming. But what I will praise Boston with, and there's a couple other teams that I had this realization, they just stuck it through, man. Like this was a Boston team that they found Jason Tatum, they found Jaylen Brown, that was their core. And then they just flipped around and tried all these other pieces until it worked. And it finally is with Porzingis, with Drew Holiday. We saw them do 100 different variations of this team, whether it be with Marcus Smart playing a key role or these number of other guys that have rolled through. They just had their guys and then they stuck with it. And that's been kind of one of my lessons postseason wide. This Dallas Mavericks team, they went all in to bring in Kyrie Irving last year, and they didn't even make the playoffs. And what did they do? They still believed it could work. They signed Kyrie Irving. They made some changes, brought in the Derek Lively's, the Dan Gaffords, and they're in the NBA Finals right here. A team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, when they traded for Rudy Gobert, it looked awful. It looked like it had no chance of working. They were a bad basketball team to an extent.
Yeah.
Obviously, still mediocre, but like it wasn't viewed as a championship contender. Flash forward a year, and there's a completely different tone and tune about that team. Then compare that to the Sixers. They've half-stepped and tried a million different things, none of them working. And here we are. We're still sitting in limbo. So I think kind of my frustration, and a lot of this has to do with the bigger picture of the lack of continuity in the front office, the amount of times that there's been turnover there. But the Sixers have never truly had this direction and stuck with it. I guess the Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid era is the clearest version of that, and where that would have been plan A, if Ben had panned out. But I think I'm kind of frustrated with that standpoint, and have done a lot of reflecting on that. So what are your thoughts on that, James?
Yeah, I mean, it's it kind of just is what it is at this point. It's one of those things that so many things went wrong. So many things went wrong, and you at this point, I think the only thing I'll kind of take from all of that is like this is the chance for them to like really make a concrete era for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Like this offseason is their chance to do that. So in my head, rather than like dwelling on the fact that like Ben is back though, by the way. I don't know if
Oh
you saw
gosh.
that.
Yeah, like clockwork for the off-season workouts, man.
I sent that to my friends. I was like, I still believe in Ben Simmons. Um,
I saw
Obviously,
one of the caption for the Ben was about how sweet it is when betting on yourself, and you're right. I think he's trying to Jonte Porter his way out of this one, man. I think
yeah.
he's taking a new route.
I wish he just did that from the start. Like if he just like got banned for life from betting, it probably would have just been easier to digest. But yeah, that was funny. It is funny. It's like he can't even stop doing it to himself, regardless.
No.
That the fact that like that obviously did not work out is like you said the biggest difference. They've had these different variations of this team for Boston, but the main two guys, the keystones have been there the whole time. So it's just about figuring it out, and I think you have that now with Tyrese and Joel, and you have the chance to fill in this roster and try to bring in guys that are impactful, that are not just around for a year or around
Yeah.
for 2 years. Maybe it would be great to see guys come in here and play 3-4 years in the Sixers uniform, and give them a chance year over year to compete in the playoffs and build off of their successes and failures, and be able to actually do that with each other rather than get a year through, clear out the roster, and try to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about what that ideal tactic looks like for the Sixers end. So I mentioned kind of the salary cap situation, how it's just Joel Embiid officially under contract. They do have the non-guaranteed on Paul Reed, as well as Ricky Council the fourth, and then the team option on Jeff Doughton there. Those are pieces that you can feel how you feel about each of these guys, but not exactly the moving the meter in the way that we need to discuss here. So have you had any sort of change in your mind with how you prioritize these big fish, the Paul George, the Jimmy Butler, the LeBron James? For me, I still sit on the standpoint of just being able to outright sign Paul George takes the cake for me. And
Yeah.
while he's not perfect as a basketball player, I like the standpoint that he can be a complementary piece that is just a floor spacing three-point shooter, while he also can take guys off the dribble and be more than that when they need him to. I think he's going to be just fine as the third star. So that's my 1A. How are you feeling on that particular topic, James?
Yeah, I think that when it comes down to it, that is, whether it's Paul George or, in any case, a free agent, that you can basically just have them absorb the cap space rather than have to give up assets for them. And then you can use, this year's pick to draft somebody or even trade that pick. I hate this time of the year because there's so many like rumors that are just kind of unfounded. Like I saw I forget who it was. It was just like, the Sixers should trade the 16th pick for Alex Caruso. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
they should, but like,
Yeah.
can they?
That was
It's always like that. It's always like, oh, they should do this. It's like, yeah, it'd be great. They should trade a first for Giannis. So I mean, I would like that's the kind of move that I'm looking for them to do. Maybe pay a pretty high price or even overpay for an elite role player like Alex Caruso and bring in a guy in cap space. I think Paul George would be obviously perfect. We've kind of run that race a couple of times now and talked about the different options, but I think definitely the priority one should be to find a guy that's willing to come in and take that cap space and, make as much money as possible and also help them, create a deeper and stronger roster by being able to use the assets beyond just the cap space.
Yeah, the Caruso conversation is funny to me. That's been kind of a name that has bounced around and it should be that he's absolutely a guy that can play a high level on a championship contending team. Certainly a winning player and a guy that deserves better than the Chicago Bulls for sure.
Yeah.
It was Kai Carlin on 97.5 who strung up the latest report that you're talking about there. But yeah, I'm with you. I think people don't realize how expensive Alex Caruso is going to be. That I've over on Sixers Digest dropped a couple videos talking about that. And pretty much every time I phrase it as like 2 first-round picks for Alex Caruso. And I think that might even be light, that I'm not even sure that gets you Caruso. He fits this category of player that like there's such a demand for and such a limited supply that when you are that high level role player, it's really difficult to get those guys, keep them. And that's what every team is looking for. So I would love Caruso on this team. I absolutely would trade 2 first-round picks for him if that's what gets the job done. But ideally, I really want to keep this 16th pick. That like I would much rather prefer to move 2 future picks if that's on the table. I understand. I think it's probably more likely than not that Caruso is not on the Sixers roster next year, as much as that does break my heart, but I think that's the reality of it. I know you mentioned getting into the draft stuff, James. So I continue to get a little more bullheaded that I just want the Sixers to make this pick, that I think they've passed up too many opportunities to bring in young talent. I think there's too many available players that could be there at the 16th pick that could be helpful right now. So I'm very much buying into the mindset that I want them to use that 16th pick. How do you feel about that?
I think I'd be happy either way. Like if the trade, like when they traded that first round pick for D'Anthony Melton, like what
Yeah.
what ended up being D'Anthony Melton, like if that's the type of move that they make, like I will be totally happy with that. Melton has been a fantastic player for them over the last couple of years. If it is in a move that like encompasses Alex Caruso, like something of that nature, I definitely would be happy with that. They are trying to win right now. What I will say on the flip side of that is I agree with you. There's a lot of guys in this draft that I like that, coming down the way, whether it's this year or even just a couple years down the line. It would be really great for them to be able to build a rotation and, depth and a bench with players that they drafted organically and,
Yeah.
grew into being players alongside Tyrese and Joel and, the third anonymous star as of right now. So, there definitely are some guys in the draft that I think are capable of that. It's always a risk. Would you rather take a risk on a guy and hope that he pans out and hope that he pans out quickly, or would you, move that pick for a player that could help you win now? There's always risk to everything, but I think that's kind of like the situation you're put in. It also is tough because it's like before free agency, so you don't know
Yeah.
how your team is going to be shaped by the end of free agency. So you're kind of making this move. You got to feel pretty confident one way or another that your team is going to shake out how you think it's going to shake out come free agency. If you're making this, then moving it to bring in another player.
Yeah, for sure there. And by the way, like in reference to the Celtics conversation, how do they continue to get these good players and keep them? They draft them. That like Jaylen Brown is the highest paid player in the NBA right now. And to
Yeah.
have him on your team and still be able to afford guys like Porzingis, guys like Drew Holiday, guys like Jason Tatum, the way that you make that possible is by
Yeah.
drafting these guys, getting their bird rights, keeping them within the organization. So you don't get that much better when you're just wasting away or flipping these picks year after year. And there's other examples like just giving up on Jaden Springer for cap space. Like I get it. Like I understand the logic. I understand the financial aspect of it. But the bottom line is like Jaden Springer could turn out to be a just fine passable NBA rotation player. And you just gave him away for no real reason. A second round pick for a dude that you drafted in the first round is not a win from the Sixers perspective. That's just not to move. That's not good business or a good way to build a team by just giving up on these guys. And they've done that far too often. So I can't have any more of that. I need them to build from the ground up a little more of this organic homegrown tactic. And I think that should start with this year. And the other angle that I think is really important for this specific draft class is, yes, it's light on kind of the top end talent or the future stars, but it's pretty deep in like this role player type guys. And a lot of the prospects are older too. The Dalton Connects,
Yeah.
the Tristan DeSilvas of the world. There's a lot of 22 and 23 years old, 3-year-olds in this class. And while oftentimes that's looked as a bad thing, I take that as a good thing in the Sixers shoes, that these are guys that can step in from day one and play a role. I think there's a lot of those guys. Tristan DeSilva continues to climb up my list, and a guy that is probably my number one choice at this point in time. Do you have any favorites in this year's draft class, James?
Yeah, I love Devin Carter.
Yeah.
I've watched, so I get this problem with me. I get caught up on that. So it's like I have so much time to spend like watching videos and trying to digest all of these players. I've spent a lot of time watching Devin Carter, obviously De Silva as well. Jared McCain is obviously fantastic, but I think the player that's like stuck out to me the most, that I like the most, is Devin Carter. He's a dog, dude. He's all
Yeah,
over
he
the
is.
place. He loves the big shots. Like, he's always
Deep
hunting
threes.
those deep threes. He's got a little bit of a weird release. Like, it's kind of like high above his head, but I like the way he gets downhill, the fast breaks. He's got a great handle, and will be a great perimeter defender as well. So he's a guy that like could grow into a good backcourt partner with Tyrese. But yeah, Devin Carter, I think if I had to pick out one name right now that like I have it on my board, like actually on my whiteboard downstairs, Devin Carter's circled right now.
Yeah, I love Devin Carter. It does seem like he's trending towards being selected before the Sixers are
Yeah.
on the board. It does seem like there's a lottery guarantee from at least one team. But unfortunate that he would not be
Yeah.
around. He would be perfect. That is probably the guy that I would put as my number one option if it were realistic. I think it's unfortunate that good for him for shooting up the draft board. He's a 3-year guy from Providence, improved every year that he was in college. So I like Carter quite a bit. He's also cut from that veteran, been around a little bit type mold. So definitely would love if that was able to come together, but not sure if I do see the possibility there. De Silva certainly at the top of my list. Plenty of other guys that are interesting as well. McCain's kind of interesting to me because he's obviously such an elite shooter, but he's a guy that I just wish was a little bit bigger. If we're talking about like him being 3 or 4 inches taller, I have a completely different perspective on how good Tristan De Silva or Jared McCain could be in that situation. I think he's going to be a bit limited. There's also a lot of these guys that I think could be second round hits as well. That's intriguing to me. The Sixers do have a second round pick. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and move all the way out of the first and drop down to that second round pick. That would be more of a financial move, that there's a $4 million cap hit that comes with that 16th pick. If they're trying to duck that number, it wouldn't shock me if they slide all the way out of the first round completely. But we'll see how that shapes out there. And we are back after a brief technical difficulty there, but a little bit of good draft chatter there, James. I do want to make sure we dive in next week as things kind of fully cement themselves on more of a deep dive into the draft prospects, the guys we like, and what the paths are, weighing the risk reward for trading that pick versus guys selected. So check back next week and we a little deeper into each of these guys. But I did have a couple other topics that I did want to dive into with you. Number one, I can't help but continue to be frustrated by Doc Rivers, man. And we had this quote come out just yesterday from Doc Rivers on the Bill Simmons podcast. By the way, I kind of love this archetype of Doc Rivers that just every couple months pops out of the woodwork, shoots from the hip, sends some shots, and then retreats to his corner there. But with Bill Simmons, he was talking a little bit about like just kind of the state of the NBA, playing at home versus playing on the road. And his exact quote was, this started in reference to the Celtics team. They were talking about, Bill was talking about how they play better on the road. And Doc Rivers said it was difficult playing at home in Philadelphia. Quote, usually you play better at home. The only place that I thought it was difficult to play at home is in Philly because of the crowd. I thought it affected our players some. So, James, what is your reaction to that quote from the doctor right there?
Yeah. I'm over him. I'm over it. Like, I can't do it anymore, man. The doctor.
Yeah, I
Uh,
shouldn't have said that. Felt wrong.
yeah. It's the worst. He's the worst. Every time I hear, I like unironically said, like, he's like a top, like a bottom 5 human being ever for me. He's one of my least favorite people that's ever walked this earth. I really can't stand him. It's always something. It's always somebody else's fault. It's always some other reason that things did not work out other than Doc Rivers. He's just insufferable to a degree that makes my blood boil. I can't do it. I don't. Every time I literally I have to like start laughing about it before I get mad about it. Otherwise, I'll just like lose my mind. but
Yeah.
it's like a big joke. It is like, it honestly does feel like he's doing a bit at this point. Like maybe he is just like playing this one, like a really long joke on all of us, that like this is just like a thing he does to get us riled up and then move on. Like you said, he just kind of like says some bullshit and then runs away for a while and then like comes back. So maybe I should start just like laughing at it like it's just some long form joke of his.
Yeah, maybe I'll give him points for the creativity because, like it's been James Harden being different after the All-Star break, even though, statistically he was basically the exact same. We've heard pretty much everything at this point for all the reasons why it was not Doc Rivers' fault there. So I'm just glad he's not a Sixers problem anymore. I can't wait to watch the experience continue in Milwaukee because I still am firm in the belief that he's just not built to be a championship coach at this point in time, really
No.
ever again. I do think it's a disaster, and that's only going to continue next year. And luckily for us, we can watch from afar now. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
can't believe Doc
Thank God.
Rivers truly cannot understand his processing the world or the way he views things because it just is his own world, and we're all living in it there. But
Yeah.
there are a little more online activities I did want to give your thoughts on. So midway through that game 3, in which the Celtics, of course, jumped out to that 3-0 lead in the NBA Finals, we get a tweet from Joel Troel Embiid here saying, "Did the Bucks give them the championship?" Now, I'll be honest, James, my first reaction to this quote is I just did not want to hear from Joel Embiid in that very moment as he's watching the finals from the couch just like the rest of us there. What was your thoughts on that quote, and does he have a point there?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I didn't see that for a full day. Like I saw it when it was like a day later. Like somebody referenced it to me during yesterday, like during the day yesterday, and I like just didn't went completely over my head. I was like, okay, like I thought they were maybe talking about an old tweet or something. I don't really understand what they're talking about necessarily. Like I don't really understand what he's saying with this. Like,
It's the Drew Holiday trade.
oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I mean, Drew is good.
Yeah.
Drew is very good. Yeah, whatever. Again, I'm just gonna not really care about it. I'm not gonna put too much stock in that. I know he's fucking around, so I mean, should he be? Probably not, but like we've done this so many times. It is what it is.
Yeah, I saw this front and center that I am a sicko that has Joel Embiid tweet notifications are on, so I had it pop right up to my phone the second he sent it there. For starters, like I said, my initial reaction is I just did not want to hear from Joel Embiid in that very moment, and I don't think he's in a spot to be able to be critiquing teams for their final for why they're in the finals and why they're not. Now, I do think that there is like something to what he's saying here. And if you want to flash back to the entire process here, that the Bucks traded away Drew Holiday to bring in Dame Lillard. We saw the way that Dame and Giannis, mostly due to injuries, were not able to click this year, and that they obviously did not have any sort of playoff success, being bounced in the first round, as were the Philadelphia 76ers there. Then Drew sits in limbo, stays in Portland for a couple days, and ultimately is flipped to Boston in exchange for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and 2 first-round picks. And Drew has been debatably the best player on the Celtics in this series. If you ask me for my finals vote right now through 3 games, it would be for Drew Holiday. I do think it's Jaylen Brown's to lose, and that's likely how things end up. You're making a face there. You don't agree?
I was actually going to ask you the same thing. I was going to say I thought it was Drew. I also was having an interesting conversation at work. If Drew Holiday wins the Finals MVP, is he a Hall of Famer?
Ooh, good question.
Because like I think like, and we also compared it to Andre Iguodala because both
I
one-time
think
All Stars.
Yeah, I think Holiday's better than Iguodala and has a better Hall of Fame case. This would be 2 championships now, and like even Iguodala, who won Finals MVP with that Warriors team, like LeBron was still averaging like 28,
Yeah,
9, and 9 in that series. He's like the
yeah,
LeBron stopper, and LeBron was still very good in that series. So
right.
I think Iguodala gets floated a little bit heavier than he should in these kinds of things. I think ultimately Drew should be a Hall of Famer. I think like he impacts winning, and one of the more interesting things that I saw about him is they asked Jay Wright about the Villanova process. I mean, the Olympic process when you're selecting players there. And they asked him, like, who's the number one guy that you set things up around? And his answer was Drew Holiday. And he talked about how he sets the tone for the entire team, how he's willing to do whatever role is necessary, and he's skilled enough to fit in whatever like spot they need him in. So that was really interesting to me. I think we've seen that in the NBA as well, how impactful he is. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think Drew Holiday deserves to be a Hall of Famer, especially if they end up finishing the job here.
Yeah, and I mean, if he wins Finals MVP for the defense that he played on the other team's best 2 players, like he's now been a really integral part in 2 championships and potentially a Finals MVP. Sucks to see him do it in Boston, but love that for Drew. But
Sucks
yeah,
it's
man,
the two biggest Eastern Conference threats that he's done it with now.
yeah. Damn it. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, yeah, Drew's been great. He's fantastic. He doesn't seem to have aged very much either. You know, he is very deep into his career at this point, and he looks like he's playing his best basketball. And he's a great dude too. That's another
Yeah.
thing. He's a great guy. So UCLA Bruin as well.
Yeah, and this is kind of weird to say about the Celtics team. I get there to the Celtics and we should hate them completely. I honestly don't feel that level of animosity to them. Like I certainly am not rooting for them. I've been rooting for Dallas in the series, but like I don't hate Jaylen Brown. I have a ton of respect for him as a basketball player and kind of like him as a guy too. Drew
Mm.
Holiday, I absolutely like as a guy and respect him a ton as a basketball player. Derek White, I have a ton of respect for as a basketball player as well. I don't even hate Jason Tatum. He's certainly not a guy that is like my cup of tea from like the archetype of player he is or stylistically the way that he plays. Al Horford, I definitely hate. That's the only one that's really locked in on this spot. But like this Celtics team doesn't have this level of hateability to me that I think a lot of the past teams did.
Yeah, I hate them because they're the Celtics. You know, because naturally. I also think Joe Mazzulla is fucking hilarious.
He's
On
bizarre, man.
dude, um that we're all villains in somebody's eyes. That has lived in my head rent free. Like my one buddy at work is a Celtics fan, and like every day I walk in, I'm like, aren't we all? Aren't we all villains to somebody? That's hilarious. That is
That was a
awesome.
bar.
That was a bar, and that was like, the thing that I can appreciate about him is that it's very genuine. Like you can't fake that type of like
Weirdness.
psychopath behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the weird. He's legitimately just kind of a psycho. So I respect that to a degree. And yeah, I mean, I agree with you to a level. It definitely like is not chill that they're winning. I don't like that idea. But I just pretend I do not see. You know, I just kind of
Yeah.
put my hand up and keep moving, and hopefully in a couple of months we could all just completely forget about it.
I hate the Knicks way more than I hate the Celtics team. There's no doubt about that. It's kind of
Recency bias.
yeah, but I think that's going to stand the test of time. That this Celtics team has even when like the Sixers have been to war with the Celtics team. We've gone 7 games. We've seen Jason Tatum rip our hearts out in a 50-point game 7 performance. There's a like I just respect the Celtics team more than I respect this Knicks team. Is kind of where I'm
Yeah,
at.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I can
so
get on board with that, I guess.
yeah, it's frustrating. Obviously not ideal. Still certainly don't feel good about it, but it's been kind of surprising to me my feelings on the Celtics team. The more I just sit back and watch, I just kind of like, yeah, this is a very good basketball team. They built it the right way, and I got to kind of live with that a little bit. So frustrating. It is what it is there, but yeah. The other part of the Joel Embiid quote that I wanted to bring up with I think this more so as a shot at the Bucks was a little bit of a kick in the butt to Daryl Morey in the Sixers front office. That really what he's saying there is it's possible to win a championships through the margins, and it's a bit disrespectful to continue to consider Drew Holiday just a margins player. He's obviously more impactful than that, but like the reality of what he's saying is the Celtics won this championship through the work they did in the offseason by that move. That means it's possible, and the Sixers have to
Yeah.
get their butts in motion to make sure. So, do you think that was a little bit of a subliminal at Daryl Morey there?
Maybe. I like I try not to read too much into it. I feel like him and Maury have a good enough relationship where he's probably like, hey, like, dude, get this shit together. I would hope so at least. And I would hope that Daryl Morey doesn't need that,
Yeah.
That incentive to make Joel happy. I would hope that he just wants to win just as much. But yeah, I mean, who knows what he means with that? Who knows who he's trying to piss off? And when Joel tweets, he kind of pisses off everybody. So he checks
On
all the
purpose.
boxes, yeah, on purpose. So it's like whether he means to piss off all the people or just some of the people, he makes sure he covers all of his bases. So I can appreciate that from him.
So I put up a poll over on Sixers Digest that I want to give your thoughts on. So
Mm.
who/what deserves the most blame for the Sixers not having the level of success that the Boston Celtics have had? Joel Embiid, front office failures, Ben Simmons/Markel Fultz, Tobias
Ugh.
Harris/misused assets, or coaching? Out of those
Uh,
5 options,
what am I saying, or what do I think that people said?
what would you say to that?
Front office.
Front office. I would agree with that. I think that's the accurate take. I think there will be, and for what it's worth, that is winning right now. Joel Embiid in second on the voting, which doesn't fully shock me there. If I'm actually assessing these a ranking, front office failures, certainly the number one shortcoming. And I do think a lot of that is because of how much turnover. We've had general managers that were too worried about wearing obnoxious collars and fighting on burner accounts. We've had, this flow of guys, people that have never been general managers before, a la Elton Brand, who I think gets a worse rep than he deserves. He at least tried. He at least made some moves and did stuff. Obviously didn't work out, and he emptied the tank a little sooner than he should have. But I do give him credit for at least, making the effort in a way where some guys haven't. The Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz one I think is interesting. I do think it's as much as like Joel gets it held against him a ton. He hasn't had his dance partner in the long term for any period of time. That Ben is the most longevity that we've had for kind of a core or a duo, and we saw the shortcomings and nosedive that his career took there. So two of the weirdest number one picks in NBA history. I truly can't wrap my brain around them. And like I've seen a lot of the critiques of with this Celtics success specifically that obviously the Sixers took Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum and took Ben Simmons over Jaylen Brown. The reality is those were both the right picks at the time.
Yeah,
Those were both surefire number one picks, and they just didn't pan out. So I have a hard time being too critical there too.
Yeah, that shit pisses me off actually, especially when it comes from Sixers fans. It's like don't act like in 2016, 2017 you didn't want those guys. Like,
yeah.
And the draft, as much recon as you do, as many workouts as you see, as many players you interview, it's a crapshoot to a degree. These guys, like Ben Simmons, was as a prospect, like as complete as somebody could be. Guys,
and by the way, a good NBA player for a point in time.
Three-time All-Star, multiple all defensive teams. Like he was good. Like, and Markelle Fultz, like, don't act like him averaging 20 points per game at Washington and playing the way that he played, knowing that you had your starting small forward, point forward, and your center, like taking a combo guard wouldn't be the perfect fit. Like, don't just miss me with all that shit. It did not work out well. It did not pan out. And like, again, so much stuff has to happen. So I'm just not here for those conversations. I think that's lame, and revisionist history is incredibly annoying, and I think an unnecessary conversation to have, because you could do that with literally every team. Right. Literally every team can go back and say, oh, we should have taken this guy. Oh, we should have done this. Oh, we should have done that. That's just not how life works.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. There is a lot of revisionist history with a lot of this, but I do think it is worth noting. Like, and by the way, with the Ben Simmons conversation, it's absolutely been lost at that point. Like how good he was for a period of time, and like the dude being a real deal all-star at a high level and contributing to winning on this Sixers team. So it is frustrating that it's kind of been lost in translation there. The reality is the cards the Sixers have is what they're dealt, and they got to continue moving on from here. All right, well, this was a bit of a doom and gloom episode, I would say, from the Sixers' perspective, as they're on the outside looking in from the rest of us. Before we wrap up here, James, what % of a chance do you give the Dallas Mavericks to be the first team in NBA history to come back from an 0-3 deficit?
8%.
8%. That's pretty high. I'll take that.
Oh, that's super high. Yeah.
I'll say
I wore my blue. I wore my blue for them.
Got to show the support. There we go. I will say I think they win in game 4. I don't think they get swept. I think they got a little bit of pride there, but I think this series is probably over in 5. I think I'm throwing it at a nice like 0.1%. I just don't see it in this Dallas team. I just don't see it, unfortunately. So it was a good run. They will maybe be back. I feel like we say that about a lot of teams and sometimes doesn't come together, but I do think Luka Doncic is cold-blooded killer who has some things to fix within himself, more so on his handling of referees and the personality, letting that get in the way. But I do think talent-wise, that's a guy that you can build around for the long haul. So for sure, in the long term, not a loss. Shout out for them for taking the strides forward. But yeah, unfortunately, I do think the Celtics are going to be crowned champions this year. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, James?
I'll see you after the finals. I won't think or see or watch any of it.
Fair enough. I respect that. But yeah, we'll be chatting up again next week. You guys make sure you stay tuned for that. Going to get a little deeper into the draft side of things. Had a bit of a reflection on the Celtics' success in this one. We'll be back zeroed in on the Sixers moving forward, talking about the ways to move through the draft. And by the way, with the new CBA, teams can start negotiating with their own free agents the second after the NBA finals conclude. So we may start to get a little bit of an idea of this picture for this offseason puzzle. Nice. So we'll see how that all happens there. The bottom line is things are going to be happening in the Sixers world. So keep it locked and posted with us here on PickSwap Media. Make sure you're dropping a subscribe to the channel, liking on this video, and any comments that you do have below. And me and James will be talking with you next time. Peace.